That's horrible. Hey.
Is it finally working?
Yeah, it's working.
We finally break through TikTok.
So sorry.
Guys, I'm sorry. I'll be honest with you. This is the first time I've ever done a TikTok live. I made my very first TikTok post yesterday to hopefully get enough followers to be able to even do this. So I'm sorry for the delay.
No, you're good.
I can't anyway.
It's a learning process, and I still forget things every time. So okay. I have not really told them anything about what we're talking about. Making sure the audio is okay. Okay. I was hearing some echoing. So I am going to let you introduce yourself, and you know way more about the case than I do. I did rewatch my videos to refresh my memory because it's been a while since I talked about it. But like I told you in our messages, what I typically do is jot down questions because people will start having questions and they'll sometimes go by pretty fast. So I'll jot those down, and then when we get to a point where we can ask some questions, I'll ask some questions. Does that sound okay? Okay.
My name is Jim Rathmann. A lot of you know me from doing some television shows such as Joe Exotic, Tigers, Lies, and Cover Up. I was on Investigation Discovery. I've been on AMC Plus, Indefensible. Most recently had a show on Amazon Prime and Viaplay called Under the Radar, Secrets of the Swedish Serial Killer. So there's a lot of content. I've been out there. My background stems from working, I started in local law enforcement, worked my way up, uniform patrols, special response team, undercover narcotics. Eventually got into detective work, worked a lot of high risk felonies and homicides.
Hey, Jim, do you have a mic on? Huh? Okay. I think you may have to get closer to your phone. There's a little bit of audio static, and I think it's just because you're too far from your phone.
Is it a little bit better now?
Yes, that's much better.
So I'm just going to stand and do this then.
Do you have a chair?
I do, but you guys can't hear me when I'm sitting in it. And I got a desk in front of me. So we'll make do. It's all good. We'll make do.
We can wait on you to get. You can't pull your chair closer.
Yeah, I got the desk. I'm already on the desk basically. So all good. So,
Okay.
so anyway, just I've done a lot of television work. Started in local law enforcement, worked my way up to detective division, working homicides, and then eventually I ended up in the United States Secret Service. I did that for multiple years. Protected President Barack Obama, our current president Joe Biden, a lot of number ones and number twos from all around the world. So I've got a wealth of experience from one end to the other, whether it's local all the way to federal level. So that's my background.
All right. People are saying, can you pull your phone closer instead of the chair?
I'm as close as I can get to it. I've got the little light thing so you guys can see me.
Yeah.
Out. So, all right. Can you give me 1 minute and I'll come right back and I'm going to rearrange this, okay?
I'm sorry. I think there's I still hear a good bit of static too. Can y'all hear me okay? I want to make sure it's not on my end. Do y'all hear static on his? Because I hear a lot of static on his. Hey, Kara. Okay. But a lot of people are hearing static on his, and I'm hearing static on his. So, okay. Oh, D, you're so funny. Okay, good deal. I just wanted to make sure it wasn't on my end, because I would not be surprised if it was with this janky internet we have over here. Purple. Some people didn't hear static on his, but a lot of people did. And I think it was just because he was so far away. There we go. That's much better.
I hope.
Yes, I think that's a lot better.
You want to start this all over?
Yeah, let's start it all over.
Well, stop texting me. I got it. Thanks. Jesus. Okay. We'll start this all over. So, my name's Jim Rathmann. A lot of you know me from doing true crime television. Been featured on Investigation Discovery, A&E, AMC Plus, Amazon Prime. Got shows coming out on WeTV. Uh, my background starts in law enforcement. Started in local law enforcement. Worked uniform patrol, undercover narcotics, special response team. Eventually became a homicide detective, and then from there I transitioned into federal law enforcement. Worked United States Secret Service, protected Presidents Barack Obama, current President Joe Biden, basically every number one, number two from all around the world, done presidential campaigns, followed Mitt Romney around for a while. So I've got a lot of experience from local to federal level. So that's my background in law enforcement.
Awesome.
So to give a little background on this case, I don't know if you want to recap for your viewers about part one that you did, and then I can kind of catch them up from there. How do you want to do that?
Okay. I don't want to get anything wrong, and it's been a while. So this, if you guys, I don't know how many of you guys went and watched the videos that I have pinned, but this is the case of Dylan McClendon, a suspicious death that happened on November the 20th of 2018 in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. A couple of months prior to Dylan's death, he had just finished a recovery program and he was living in a transitional home. And ended up on the night of November the 19th, I believe that's correct, of 2018. Some of his roommates ended up going and purchasing substances from a dealer. And the substances that they purchased, or the substance that they purchased, is not a substance that Dylan had ever partook of. So in the early morning hours, there's a bit more to the story, but I don't want to get too super detailed. In the early morning hours, one of the roommates placed a 911 call saying that one of his roommates was deceased and another one was not too far from that, but still alive. He thought that roommate could be saved. The roommate that was deceased was Dylan. So, of course, law enforcement, EMTs, paramedics, whomever, they get there, and of course, Dylan is beyond saving. They did not do an autopsy. His toxicology showed just a small amount of the metabolite, not enough to cause the death. Is that correct?
Yeah, you're spot on with all of that. So I'll tell you how I came into this. Dylan's mom, Miss Regina, she reached out to me multiple times from 2022 into 2023. Took an interest in her son's case. She had asked me a lot of times, and I actually went to Baton Rouge. The first time I went there was in August of 2023. And so Miss Regina brought over all the files that she's had, everything from the private investigator she had previously, law enforcement, her own independent research. And so we literally just got together and just made a mess of the table, spread paperwork everywhere, and went through everything. What was interesting and what we came across was a lot of not only inconsistencies, there was a really poor job done by the coroner's office, which we're going to get into, but we were able to uncover a lot just from that. Now, as you had just mentioned, allegedly Dylan had gone with his roommates. He was living in a sober living home at the time, and allegedly he had went to Denham Springs, Louisiana, and they purchased narcotics from some unknown dealer, and then they actually allegedly made multiple trips back and forth throughout that day and that evening. The part in there that doesn't make sense is Dylan spent the majority of that Sunday on the phone with his family. So making these frequent trips would go against them talking to him on the phone. The other parts that doesn't make any sense at all is Dylan never used these types of narcotics, as you had mentioned. just it didn't happen. That wasn't his choice of substance. He had a substance abuse problem, but not of this caliber, which would be heroin, fentanyl, things of that nature. That wasn't anything that he ever dove into. So while Regina and I were going through the paperwork and we were looking through it, there was a list of phone records that she was able to obtain from law enforcement. We went through that. And one of the things that I recognized was a consistency with a particular phone number that was there multiple times leading up to that day, but it started immediately following the 911 call. So much so that there was 40 and 50 minutes spent on this call in the middle of the night into the early morning and into the next day. And this is coming from one of the roommates who was the, purported main person involved in this entire case that was involved with the dealing. So I decided to call that phone number. To my surprise, nobody had ever called that number before. Now, I literally looked at this phone record log for less than 10 minutes. And
Oh,
I
wow.
don't know how nobody else looking at this case had picked up on that. But I went ahead and called this female. She answered. She agreed to talk to me. Virginia was sitting there, and I ended up having a lengthy conversation with this woman. And she told me that she was, at that time, the girlfriend to the main suspect. She knew what was going on that evening. She even alluded to the fact that we don't know the whole entire story, that there was some lying that took place. She agreed to talk to law enforcement because we wanted to get the main detective involved. And then at that point, she never showed up for that meeting, and then she changed her phone number, turned everything off, and kind of went into hiding. So really, we don't know what all she knows, but we do know now that the story that was told to law enforcement, the story that was being told, was not the truth. Okay, this is what we suspect.
Yes. Okay, so some of the things that I remember. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay. I think there were questions about the time of death, questions with like the lividity and him being face down in a position where none of their stories had ever put him in that position.
So we go through the case. We continue to go through it. I even went back there in February of 2024, and we actually sat down in the corner. So there's a lot more information that we got. So sticking with 23, I'm going to take you through until I go back in February of 2024, where we actually talk with the coroner that actually physically examined Dylan's deceased body. So Dylan, this call came in after midnight. What was told to law enforcement was that they were just playing video games with him nothing but 20 minutes prior to his death. They came in, he wasn't breathing, they called 911. 911 came, but it was already too far gone. Think about this, it's a sober living home, and the ones that called in said they went outside to the truck to make a drink. Sober living home, they're out there having a drink. Clearly, there's no supervision or anything going on. They said they came in 20 minutes, Dylan's deceased. They go ahead, they called 911. The problem with that is that when the coroner's office came and what's in the coroner's report is that Dylan's body was already beginning to start rigor mortis status. That means he would have had to have been dead for a few hours. But that immediately goes against their statement of we were just playing video games with him 20 minutes ago. Law enforcement on the scene knows this information, so they're pulling the three roommates and questioning them individually. Law enforcement is saying this story isn't adding up. But that isn't what happened. The coroner came, was only on scene for about 33 minutes in total, observes the body, takes pictures of pill bottles, various things in and around the house, goes through the cabinets. He did what a coroner's typically going to do, which they take a very long syringe like this, and they go through the bladder. And what they do is they extract urine, and they do a drug panel. So they pour it right. They use that syringe, and they put the urine onto a drug panel and to see what lights up. So things were lighting up like opioids and various narcotics. Well, that's what's showing on the urine, but the real examination really comes from what's in the blood. So he's supposed to be able to collect that, but at that point, he got the urine, got what he thought was an overdose. So he loaded up the body took the body to the coroner's office in Baton Rouge. So now you're talking roughly 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning, because he didn't show up until closer to 2:30 in the morning. Goes to the coroner's office, where he then draws arterial blood, where they take another really long, thick syringe that they have to go through, and they got to pull out that blood. That blood goes to a crime lab. That's what they're able to use for toxicology purposes for the level of intoxication based on whatever narcotic is in your system.
Mm-hmm.
Before the sun came up, he already did a death certificate of calling it an overdose. And he's gone. Miss Regina then gets the calls. Her own funeral home goes, picks up Dylan's body. They set up the funeral, and that's what Miss Regina had known from that point on. Well, now I'm going to take you forward to 2024 when I went in February, because the story's not adding up. And I have worked in numerous cases where I've worked with the coroner. So Miss Regina and I went to go meet with this coroner. He was kind enough to meet with us. We sat down and we started going over the conversation. Now, he had his files. He had every note. He knew of Dylan's case. He reviewed his photos. He reviewed all his information before talking to us. Here's where the problem comes in. He's telling us what he observed when he got there. The body was a partial rigor mortis status. He did pull the urine. The drug panel did pop up with various opioids and various things that were popping up on that drug screen. He then took the body, talked about extracting the blood, sending it off to the crime lab. So my first question was to him, did you wait for that blood work to come back from the crime lab? And he said no. They had already ruled it an overdose. Okay?
Yeah.
Off. Okay? The level of toxicology, had he have reviewed the toxicology screen, which we handed to him in person, that toxicology screen did not reveal any, and I mean any, lethal dose of any narcotic in Dylan. That was the first problem. And I asked him, well, he had said that they had observed that there were drugs. There was a scale that was there that had what appeared to be like heroin on it. So therefore, that means that there was some sort of felony going on inside that residence. The state law in Louisiana is that in a commission of a felony, the heroin being a felony, there's drugs involved, you must do an autopsy. It's not that you can or you can think about it, or you shall do an autopsy. But they didn't do an autopsy. The reason for it is that they had an internal memo that said that we won't do autopsies because we don't have enough time or personnel to be able to do autopsies on all the various overdoses, so therefore we're just not going to do them. Well, then I asked another question. Did you talk with law enforcement before you left scene? And his response was no, I didn't. My job is only to examine the body and the body itself. That's it. And I immediately stopped him and I said, well, wait a minute now. Where you're working now is the same area that I used to work in, okay? I know who the coroner is. And I can tell you that in every case, I may not tell him what the deal is when he first shows up, but before he leaves, we're going to compare notes to make sure what he's getting and the information we have matches. Can't always just be science. There has to be a little bit more behind it as well, right? He said he never once spoke to any detective on scene. Now think about this for a minute. He's already in his head ruled that this is going to be an overdose because of the toxicology screen on scene. Never once did he talk to the detectives who are thinking, this is a homicide, there's foul play involved here. Instead of comparing notes or having any conversation, he just loaded up the body and he left. Did no autopsy, waited for no toxicology screen to come back from the crime lab. Okay? Not to mention, this is the other part we found out. When Dylan passed away in 2018, he actually died November 20th of 2018, which is a Tuesday. Or I'm sorry, I think it was a Monday. You want to know what was going on that week? It was the same week as Thanksgiving. And when the coroner got off of work at 6 o'clock in the morning or 5 o'clock in the morning, whenever he was done processing Dylan's deceased body, he's off. He's on his way to go enjoy his vacation. He doesn't have to come back for work for the rest of the week. So instead of doing the full duties of the job, we're now going to choose to just do the bare minimum. It's just an overdose. Nobody's going to look into this. Who really cares? Because that's kind of the treatment that Miss Regina got and Dylan's family received from this. It is the biggest botch job ever. But when I asked him why he never talked to him, when I started telling him, well, do you know that the detective said that when they pulled the roommates to the side, that they were just playing video games with him 20 minutes prior? No, I didn't know that. Do you know that they went and purchased drugs multiple times and that he was supposedly riding with them? Because had he had asked these questions, the science, the physical science of the body would have gone completely against the roommate's statements. And what that would have done is change the now death certificate, which says overdose, to suspicious death or even homicide. The moment the coroner put an overdose, the sheriff's office hands are relatively tied. You have detectives trying to work a homicide case based on what they're told, but now they can't get the backing and the scientific data and proof from the coroner's office to back them in the fact that this is actually a homicide investigation. So as they still tried to process through, and I'm going to tell you, the lieutenant that works this case for East Baton Rouge Sheriff's Office, I believe he is working this case as hard as he can. But he's limited to what he can do because of that autopsy. And because of, I would rather get on my Thanksgiving vacation than to do the due diligence of your job that you're supposed to do. Miss Regina and her family, Dylan's family, has never been able to get justice. And to me, that is absolutely terrible. And I'm going to stop there so that way I can answer some questions because I'm sure there's a lot of confusion.
All right, I'm gonna turn my microphone back on. I may have been the problem. Um, can we talk about the petechial hemorrhaging that was in his eyes? Can you comment on that?
Yeah, so when you go through the autopsy report, will go usually when they have the report, they'll go through from head all the way to toe and what it is that they're finding. He did find the hemorrhaging in the eyes, which, we had asked that question, could this have happened from violently throwing up? The problem was there wasn't a whole lot of throw up there, so that didn't make sense. So where else could it come from? It comes from strangulation, struggling to breathe, right? So again, that even though it's in his report, that wasn't anything he brought up to law enforcement. The positioning of his body had been moved. There's just too many inconsistencies when examining. The body's in rigor mortis status. That takes a couple of hours. Lividity's starting to set in, so he clearly didn't just die 20 minutes ago. Had he had just taken literally 2 minutes of his time to go over to the multiple detectives that are standing there and say, hey, what do you got? Well, I pulled the roommates to the side and they said before they made the 911 call, 20 minutes before that, they were playing video games. The guy left to make a drink in the truck and came back and he's dead. Does that consist of what you're finding? Absolutely not. Well, now the roommates are in trouble, right? Now they've got a problem. But instead of taking that 2 minutes, he'd rather go back to the coroner's office where he's going to draw the arterial blood. Why he didn't do it on scene, I don't know. I'll give him an out there only because there are situations where you may not be able to extract that correctly given the location that they're in or whatever. He was able to get that back at the coroner's office. But again, you can determine how long somebody's be dead based on the film on their eyes, their rigor mortis status, lividity. There's ways to determine how long somebody could have been down. Core body temperatures. But again, none of this was used. None of it. And it's mind-blowing to me that this person has the position of power to be able to rule somebody's death and the manner of their death without ever really doing an investigation on it. It's just an overdose. We'll just move on.
All right. So someone says, is there any kind of investigation going on?
Yeah, I actually, spoke with the lieutenant in charge of this case, and he's still trying to do everything he can. Just to let everybody know, these 3 roommates were arrested, even though they didn't have the backing of the coroner's office. They were arrested and charged appropriately. But the charges were unfortunately had to be dropped because of the lack of the coroner's evidence. The coroner's autopsy has single-handedly poo-pooed this entire case and the justice that Dylan McClendon's family rightfully should get because it was too hard to do your job at that time in the morning. Didn't want to, just wanted to get on with your day. And I'm sorry, that is just awful, awful. So currently, what's going on is, there's attorneys involved. Miss Regina is trying to get an attorney to take this case forward because there's a thing called statute of limitations. However, you can't reasonably expect a mother to know what the statute of limitations are when she hasn't been told the truth this whole entire time. And until that corner was spoken to in February of 2024, that's when the statute of limitations should technically start, because that's when you know that this was not done correctly, that there's something wrong, there's foul play involved, there's egregious mistakes made by the coroner's office, however you want to chop it up. But now there needs to be some sort of civil, and hopefully this can back into a criminal matter. There is no double jeopardy. They weren't actually brought to court, so there should be no reasons why they can't be recharged. Now that they'll have the backing of the coroner's office. That's what we hope.
Okay. I hope I can mention this. If I can't, we'll just not. But Miss Regina thought that an autopsy had been performed because of something that she saw. Can we discuss that?
Yeah. So after Dylan passed away, it was I want to say 1 maybe 2 days later. They're over at the coroner's office. I'm sorry, at the funeral home. They're in Denham Springs, and when they were at the funeral home, they were able to observe Dylan. What Regina states is that she believes she saw some sort of staples, right? It was some sort of slashing going. I don't know if it went this way. I think it went this way, is what she was describing to me, as if there was cut open, peeled back, and then but he was all stitched, like there was staples, like metal staples. She distinctively remembers seeing this. Family members distinctly remember seeing this as well, but we don't know. There's no photos of it. There's nothing marked like that from the coroner's office report. The funeral home does not recall if that was there or not there at the time. What we do know is that the funeral home, through their embalming process, would never have a reason to do that. So we've ruled that out. We've talked to those that were involved with the embalming. So that wouldn't have been the case. So the only thing is what was the purpose? If that is the case, if his body were to be exhumed, would we see that? And what would be the reason for it? I mean, we don't know. I have no idea. I'm just making a complete opinion here. Was there, organ harvesting going on that we don't know about? I don't know. We really, truly just do not know. But that is nowhere, anywhere in the coroner's report. Even the coroner himself says, I don't recall that. That isn't something that we would have done. I wouldn't have used staples. I don't really know. We don't really have an answer to that. And Sonny, yeah, they typically they would cut a chest if they were to do the autopsy, but they didn't do an autopsy. No autopsy was performed, so there shouldn't be any cutting open in staples.
So a lot of people are asking about exhuming the body. Is that a possibility? Is that something that is being considered?
Well, I don't think. I mean, Regina isn't taking anything off the table. I think if that would be a reason, if we had to get an independent coroner or use multiple jurisdictions coroners to exhume this body and do a full autopsy, if that's even possible. Well, I don't know. One, I'm sure that would be quite costly, but I don't think at this point, and for a mother that loves her son as much as she does, and as far as she's gone to get justice, I wouldn't be a bit surprised if that came to the table at some point or another where his body is exhumed and they do have a private coroner do an full body autopsy to really determine what happened. I don't even know how much scientific evidence would be left at this point. I don't really know, but I do think that would be a great option in order to see, one, is there staples across, what happened, and what was really the cause of death, because it's not an overdose. I think you're still on mute.
Yeah, I am. Okay, so the roommates were saying that most of them were asleep, but they were actually texting one another back and forth while they were allegedly asleep, correct?
Correct. There was text messaging going back and forth. There was another roommate that had overdosed. There was Narcan used on that roommate, why it wasn't used on Dylan, if that was the case. So again, I don't buy the story. Dylan talked with his family the whole day on the 19th of November. He was talking about how he didn't want to be there anymore, how he couldn't wait to get out of there. He didn't feel safe. There was a problem on November 18th, and his roommate overdosed that he was sharing a room with, and he had to help save that person's life. That's what caused him on November 19th of 2018 to talk with his family repeatedly, talking about, I'm concerned, I don't know what's going on, things aren't kosher here. And all of a sudden, that particular night, was it because he was going to rat? Did they think he was going to snitch on what was going on? Did he know too much information? His money was stolen. The cash that he had gotten paid with was gone. So clearly, they robbed him at the same time. There was nothing good going on. We believe there are some phone records being withheld. I can't confirm or deny that, but there's some inconsistencies with what was given. And so hopefully at some point or another, we'll be able to get that as well. But again, the phone records aren't going to lie. They're going to tell you who was called with who, where they were traveling. All that information is there. How on earth I can look at phone records for 10 minutes and pick up on a phone number and then find out that nobody's ever even called it? I don't know how that even happens, and then ends up being the girlfriend of your main suspect. There's a lot here, but yeah, the roommates were texting back and forth. So went completely against their statements again that they made to law enforcement, as if they were, sleeping, getting ready for work the next day, and it just makes no sense at all.
So did law enforcement get the text messages, or
Yeah, law enforcement got all those text messages. How Regina got them, I think she got them from the detective, but that's how we were able to see them.
okay? So do you think law enforcement is withholding some of them?
No, I don't want to say that, and the reason I say that is I really believe in this lieutenant that's been investigating this case since the beginning. He's always kept up with Regina and her family. He's always there to answer the questions. He's the one that went above and beyond to make sure that these three individuals are charged for what he believed happened. He went to great lengths to make this happen. Unfortunately, he didn't have the backing of the coroner's office, and that's where the problem came. I don't want to sit there and say he's withholding. Perhaps there's a mistake and they left a page or two out, or they just extracted that before giving that information publicly because maybe there's a bigger investigation going on and they don't want it revealed. There's truly no way to know. But my heart and my gut tells me the lieutenant investigating this case wants it solved as badly as Regina and her family do.
Okay, let's talk about the message that which roommate was that sent Regina that message? Um, was it Ty Castro that sent her the message about others wanting to wait until the morning to call 911 and so that they could deny involvement?
Right. There were some they didn't want to be a part of it. They didn't, that just goes to show more of all the illegal activities going on at that time. There was even one of the roommates that reached out to Regina well after Dylan's passing and essentially was confessing that she didn't know the true story of what had happened and how sorry they were, and then disconnected the call and went ghost. Another one of the roommates now had relocated to Florida, where that person probably would have been one to be able to talk about what had happened. Unfortunately, overdosed last year themselves and is no longer on this earth to be able to speak with. So clearly, some of the narcotics past has not gone away with these individuals.
All right.
Also makes you, you know, this sober living home. I don't believe is in existence at that particular house, but the sober living home, I believe, is still in existence today, at least with other places. And I think the ones that run that should be fully investigated because of what their involvement could possibly be in this case. I mean, we know that there was a lot of phone calls made to a particular person within that sober living facility, but yet that has never been disclosed, nor has it ever been talked about. So, what's behind those conversations? why a need for such long conversations and not make it public? Why no offering to help out Regina and her family with what had happened? Why not? Why ignore her all this time?
Okay. So Sassy Pants says, is it likely with death of possible suspects the investigation won't go further?
I'm not sure. I know what you mean. Is it likely with death of possible suspects? Well, that's only one. There was three. There was three roommates, so there's more. And I don't think it's just. I think there's you have the female that I spoke to. Um, we know who she is. We know exactly who she is. Law enforcement's tried to make contact with her. She ghosted the lieutenant that was there to meet with her. Um, she knows what's going on too, and I think anybody that's tied to this can end up getting in trouble unless they come forward with it. But there's still two roommates that are alive that know exactly what had happened. And scientifically, if you can actually do a real autopsy on this case and really examine this death instead of going into it with preconceived notions, I think we'll find out exactly what had happened to Dylan and why he passed away. But it definitely wasn't an overdose.
Besides those roommates, how many did other people live in the home as well?
In the sober living facility?
Yeah.
Yeah, there was so Dylan and he had three roommates, so it'd be a total of four living inside that residence.
Okay. For some reason, I was thinking there were even more people besides that.
There were people that were coming in and out and hanging out, but that was my understanding that there were four. I don't know. I'm sure Miss Regina can come on and answer that if she's able. But I thought it was only three roommates plus some girlfriends that had come by, so it may have been up to five or six people at one time.
All right. Do any of you guys have any questions? The case is still open. It's not closed, correct?
No, so it's still being looked at. The lieutenant's still trying to do everything he can. Again, they need some new information. They need something new to be able to go forward. But again, if it were possible that an attorney were to come forward to be able to support Regina in this case against the coroner's office, where we're able to, if the family is accepting of exhuming this body, I think that would be the best way to go about it. Exhume the body, really find out what had happened, and have your true scientific evidence that can support what law enforcement found out on November 20th of 2018. The stories didn't match up. Several weeks after you ruled it an overdose, you find out that the toxicology has never been at a level that would cause somebody to pass away. But to make matters worse, coroner never looked at it. The first time he ever saw those results when we presented it to him in February of 24. So you're talking what, 6 years later? 6 years later? That's ridiculous. Sun wasn't even up. He already had a death certificate done with an overdose. That to me is mind blowing.
Hi.
All right, guys, this is Regina. This is Dylan's mother. I'm going to mute my microphone, so I'll let you say whatever you want to say, and then I'll watch for questions.
No, I basically was here to clarify or confirm any other questions. Yes, there were other roommates in the house. There was house managers, there were supervisors. To be honest, there was a total of 8 living in that house. And the house manager and everyone else involved claimed to be sleeping when all this was going on. Nobody heard anything. Um, they were woke up after they found Dylan's body. Several of them tried to do CPR. He was so beyond resuscitation. So that's where it started getting really weird for me. And then me, my mom, and my sister went to pack up his stuff that morning after we got the call. Shannon actually called me, which is Dylan's stepmom. And as we were leaving, one of the guys told us, y'all deserve justice for Dylan. So, I mean, what is a parent supposed to do when you hear that? You fight.
All right, some people are wanting to know, let's see, there were questions about the coroner. Is there any way to get an investigation open on the coroner?
Well, we're certainly not against it. That's something we need an attorney to get involved with here. And we're seeking, we've talked to several, and before they can finish hearing the entire story as we're doing tonight, they immediately go, when was the death? What is the year now? Statute of limitations. We can't do anything statute of limitations.
So,
I'm hearing statute of limitations. If they would just listen for 5 minutes and realize what Regina and her family have gone through. I understand the date of death was November 20th of 2018. But there's no way a reasonable mother will know statute of limitations, what law enforcement is supposed to do and not do, coroner's office rules, when are they supposed to do an autopsy or not. It's law. It's the state of Louisiana's law. If a felony is in commission of a crime and a death happens, you must do an autopsy. Your internal memo does not supersede law. So again, none of this information came about till much later. Then you find out from the coroner himself, the one who examined Dylan's deceased body, November 20th of 2018, then sits there and says, you know what, had I known that information, I would have ruled this completely different. That was exactly what was told to us. Had I known that information, I would have completely ruled this differently.
And also keep in mind that the coroner, his right-hand man, his chief investigator, I contacted him. He came and met me at my work because I needed clarification. He himself, this is the chief investigator, confirmed until I said there's no time of death in this report. So what am I supposed to think? He said, by everything that it states, considering the lividity, petechial hemorrhage, and everything else, my guesstimation is that he had been dead 4 to 6 hours. That was the chief investigator of the coroner. So it just builds and builds, and it's awful.
Yeah, we need the right attorneys to be able to listen to what needs to be said. And something to be filed is, does the statute of limitations really start once we found out of the coroner's faults? Again, you can't hold a mother reasonably, you can't reasonably expect her to know what the ins and outs of the law are. That's not how it works. You have to wait until you find something wrong before you put the best forward. I would expect that of anybody out there that doesn't know how the court systems work or what the laws work. So, in my opinion, until February of 2024, that's when we knew everything was wrong. That's when we got confirmation, coroner's office, that they botched this thing. So that's really, in my opinion, that's when the statute of limitations should start. I'm not an attorney. Clearly, I don't know that, but I'm hoping there's an attorney that can look at that and say, you know what, maybe we can't file it here because there's circumstances that are outside of the norm, and something can be filed because that's really what's needed. I think once that happens, everything can happen from there. Investigation into the coroner's office, what actually went wrong, examining the body, whether it's civil suits. More importantly, the criminal aspect of it. Let's get the evidence needed to support the sheriff's office and the detective that's been working his butt off on this for years, never forgetting about it, because this is the one case that's been bothering him because he can't solve it because he doesn't have the coroner's office backing because he did a terrible job.
And touching on what Jim just said, after he called and spoke with the female that was involved, I brought all of that information back to the homicide lieutenant, and she missed 3 meetings with him. And finally, she told him, do I need to hire an attorney? Then she told him, I'm done talking. And she changed her phone number. But he did tell us that if we kept bringing him the information, he would continue to investigate it. So it's not an open investigation. They had to close it so that I was able to get the records. As long as the case was open, I didn't have access to any records. But he did say that he would reopen it. Well, he would continue to investigate, and he has held true on that as of now.
Yep. Even though it might be closed now, the right information can reopen a case. Doesn't mean it's permanently closed and doesn't mean it's moving on. So, as we continue to gather more information, justice is McClendon and his whole family. Not only did they lose their son, but they
And I also want to touch on the part about the staples, and probably most of the 9 people that were with me that morning are on this live and can verify that they saw it also. So that's a big, big question right now for someone who didn't have an autopsy. Why do you have staples from your shoulder to the middle of your chest? It just gets so deep. You don't know where to start.
And I just want to clarify, at the time that you saw that, you still did not know that there had not been an autopsy done, so you thought that it was from
Absolutely.
yeah.
I looked at my sister and Dylan's stepmom Shannon, and all 3 of us kind of said, very quietly, well, that must be from the autopsy. Because we had never been through this before, and that's what's supposed to happen. So when we finally found out in late December that there was not an autopsy, after I then found out that we should have been contacted, and if they chose not to perform an autopsy, we should have been given the right to choose to pay for one. None of that happened at all. When the sheriff's office showed up at Dylan's dad's house, Dylan's stepsister called the coroner's office, immediately. His body was ready to be picked up and taken away. Now keep in mind, he didn't get there till 4 a.m. So we weren't even given an option to pay for a private forensic pathologist. Nothing. So it wasn't until late December that we knew he didn't have an autopsy.
Um, I had another question for you, Regina, but I can't remember what it was. Maybe I'll remember in a minute. But other people are asking, are there other complaints against the coroner?
Yes.
Yeah, there's been numerous complaints against the coroner's office itself. I mean, you can Google that and see. I mean, my gosh, they even wasn't there a case where somebody actually been shot and murdered and didn't even know the person was even shot.
Yeah. Yes. I friended that the sister of that little boy. Yeah. The funeral home went to prepare his body, and they found the bullet, and the coroner's office had to come back and pick him up and bring him back to the forensic facility to do an autopsy. It's awful.
When was that, Regina? When did that happen?
That was New Year's Day in 2020.
Wow.
I'm still in contact with his family. They found the person responsible, and I went to court with them and watched them get their justice. And it was heartbreaking because I can't even imagine the things that she told me that was at the scene that was so obvious, and they said it was an overdose. They immediately said it was an overdose. And the things that she told me in her mother's living room. It doesn't take really anybody brilliant to know it wasn't an overdose. So it was heartbreaking, and I'm glad Joa got justice, and I'm very happy for his family. But even beyond that, I so many people have reached out to me in the past about this, and some of these stories are heartbreaking. I've spoken at the Capitol, either hire more pathologists. Something's got to change. Everybody's about justice, justice, justice. Heck, we just want answers.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a shame. I mean, it really is. I remember when we sat with this corner and asked the question, because I really wanted to dig into why didn't we do an autopsy? Why did we not follow the law? I mean, we couldn't. And the answer was because there was a bad batch of heroin. There was a lot of heroin overdoses. The fentanyl was making its way on the scene. There were just overdoses all the time, and they didn't have the time for it. They didn't have the people for it or the places for it. Well, it's not really an excuse, because when you take a situation like this, or even if it was your family member, would that be a good enough reason for you? No. Would it be a good enough reason for the coroner if it was his family member? No. But and just so people know, when a area is over, they have too many bodies to be able to do autopsies, they send them to other states. They get state assists. So a lot of Louisiana autopsies actually go to Arkansas. I don't know if people know that. They'll do the autopsies there. You can send to Texas, Mississippi. You can send it to other parishes or counties based on the state you live in. So the reason that they didn't do it, or their internal memo, they just think it's going to supersede what is actual state law. That to me, that's a civil suit in itself. Like, you can't just make that determination on your own because you want to get the staff, or at least send the bodies where they need to go to be properly examined. Just ignore it altogether makes you wonder how many more out there were not actual overdoses that were actually done by foul play. And when you think of holidays, that's the last time on earth I'd ever want to have something happen to me out there. This happened right before Thanksgiving. You have the deceased person that was shot that they didn't even know that happened on New Year's Day. I mean, come on. We want to do our job, or we want to be off. Thank you both.
Or you don't stereotype people due to the surroundings that they're in. Just because he was in a sober living home, you don't.
Regina, because that was something that he had said to us. On his way there, he was thinking, oh, it's a sober living home.
Yep.
Right? Therefore, it's got to be an overdose. And so he went into it with preconceived notions for everything getting there. It's probably bad because he got called out of bed. But that's not our problem. You're there to do your job. Do your job.
I agree. And he did. Sadly, he admitted it. Wow.
Can he change? Can the coroner change the manner of death on his own?
If the, and I don't want to, Jim probably knows this more than me, but he can change it if the proper information is brought to him. They've been called out several times due to other situations. They were called out on the news due to non-compliant behavior, actions, whatever. But I think it takes, you have to really convince them to change it. And here we are 6 years later, how can you convince a coroner to change the cause of death when they've been called out publicly, loudly for 6 years now for their lack of doing their job right, or doing their job at all, actually?
Yeah, I don't really know. I don't think any coroner would change their original findings until they're able to re-examine. That's why I think it's so important. it were to come to it to where Dylan's body was exhumed, because then you can do the autopsy and then you can, without a shadow of a doubt, we're able to examine it. Cause of death is not an overdose. We know that from the toxicology reports. They can go through their findings and actually do an autopsy this time and determine the cause of death. And if the cause of death is foul play, then they should absolutely change the manner of death on the death certificate. But they haven't done that, and I don't know if they would do that without re-examining or examining the body.
And I don't know how autopsies work, but the first thing you would look for, due to the petechial hemorrhage, the position of the body, all the circumstances surrounding it, you would look to see if that hyoid bone is broke, and that would seal the case right there. Am I right, Jim, or not? Or
Absolutely correct on that. And we would never allow that same coroner to be anywhere near Dylan's body to examine. This would be somebody completely independent. I would imagine Miss Regina would probably want to hire somebody independently or ask for a state police coroner. Somebody
no, I wouldn't.
would not be anywhere near Baton Rouge.
I would not involve the state police, for reasons that we could talk about later. Someone asked, did they take pictures? Yes, they took pictures, and those are awful too. They were limited in the pictures that they released to us. I think it was one of the drug screen, one of his driver's license, his his ID, and two of the body at the scene, if I'm correct. And I do the East Baton Rouge Sheriff's Office did release pictures. I don't have them in my hand. They are tied up with someone else, but they also have pictures, evidently a lot more than what the coroner's office released to me. So yeah, there are pictures. There's some I just have to get my hands back onto.
Hey, can you say which roommate it was that passed away?
Tyler Castro.
Oh wow, okay. He's the one that messaged you.
He is, and we
Wait,
we
when did he
actually
pass
did
away?
when Jim came down in February. We had lunch with Lieutenant Henning, and he made a comment about Castro, and I couldn't get it off of my mind. So I go home and I start researching and Googling, and I find the obituary that Castro had passed away the week before. And I sent Jim the obituary. I said, tell me this isn't real. His name was just mentioned today by Lieutenant Henning. So that happened in February. He is the one that sent me the message. It was December 21st.
Mhm. So he just passed away this year.
Yes, February
Okay.
2024.
I was thinking because I was remembering when I first made the videos, he was still alive.
Yes,
Wow, that's
he
crazy.
he became very active at one point, wanting to talk. He started to talk,
Mhm.
and then he kind of shut down. He was, scared to for whatever reason. But he was, yeah, he's a big factor in this. And we found out in February that he passed away in Florida.
Wow, goodness gracious.
Henning's
So
always
if you, if
solve it. He wants to solve this case, and he hasn't given up on it. And therefore, he keeps checking in and keeping tabs. I respect that a lot.
Regina, if you did decide to hire a private pathologist to do another autopsy, do you have any idea what the cost of that is?
No, I don't. And I honestly, for answers, I don't know. I don't think about the cost. I think about what the heck happened, because we all know. I mean, it's a sober living home, and I'm reading a 61-page incident report that talks about finding a scale in the bathroom. Something is going on. Jim talking to, when it first came out, everybody made the big deal about there was a female involved and no one, interviewed her and this and that. Well, there's a female on this phone log that no one, absolutely no one picked up on, that it was a female name, and it says female. And for Jim to pick up on it in less than 5 seconds and call her, it's insane. And what she indicated to us, it was some pretty deep information. It kind of confirmed some of the things we were already thinking. Unless I'm overthinking, Jim could touch on that. But she was pretty straight in her answers. She didn't stutter. She didn't think twice. She just, everything he asked, she immediately answered.
Yep. She's got a story to tell. Hopefully she'll come forward and tell it, and my hope is that, I mean, she has kids now. Maybe she can understand if this is one of your child. How wouldn't you want somebody to come forward for you too? It's been many years, but for whatever reason, she's still. If I were a guessing person on this, I would think that she's scared of her ex, and what that retaliation would be like based on the information she knows, and she doesn't feel comfortable or secure enough in her environment to be able to talk about it, just yet. But hopefully that'll change. But if Miss Regina gets that attorney and things start moving the way that we hope to be able to move this case here very shortly, she's going to be on the other end of the subpoena, or maybe even the defendant herself. So.
Yeah, we have so much, conversations with homicide lieutenants. There's so much. I'm still totally lost at the fact that the criminal investigation got swept the way it did. I'm not gonna lie, I'm mind blown by that part. But then the deeper you dig, you really didn't have to dig deep, but the further you look, when someone, as Jim did, took the time to actually look at the things we had, it's mind blowing what's right there in front of your face, and nobody picked up on it. I'm trying to keep up with the questions, and I can't. It's not that I'm ignoring them. I can't keep up with them.
No, they do go by fast. I really haven't seen anything new. Some of them are talking about another case. Let's see. I don't think I've seen anything new. Yeah, the last one I see is did they take pictures, and you did answer that.
And there was one about the sober living home. Yes, the sober living home was closed down in 2021. Me and Dylan's stepmom, Shannon, actually went and met with the um, office of, what is it, the OIG, whatever. Um, and he did some research. He told us that if if the sober living home was doing things the right way, he would be able to pull up all kinds of information. And he contacted the Office of Inspector General something. I think that's it. But when he called me, he said that nothing pulled up, because if it did, he would have closed them that day. If they were receiving any kind of federal money, grant money, they would be closed that day. And he said that was a red flag because of the age of the owner of the sober living home was offered this kind of money and denied it. They're flying under the radar. So that's when antennas really started popping up.
All right, guys. Does anybody have any other questions before I end our live?
I just want to say thank you for giving us the opportunity to come on and talk about this case and in depth like we have. Sure, as we get more information, we can do this again in the future and be able to update everybody on this case. But this major injustice, and we really appreciate the platform to get the word out.
I appreciate you coming on and sharing with us. Let's see. I thought I saw another question. Hang on one second. Are they sure? Let's see. Are they sure the roommate that passed, that was going to help, passed from an OD? Could that be?
That's the information that's online.
Yeah.
What?
Like that. So that's what.
Well, and the one that passed, the one that called 911, if that's what they're referring to. The crazy thing is, he was supposed to be sleeping, but at the same time he was sleeping, there were 42 text messages exchanged between the three boys that were arrested. So, I don't know what his intentions were. Obviously he wasn't sleeping. Dylan's cell phone shows that same person that passed sending text messages to Dylan's phone while he was supposed to be sleeping. So I really don't know what his intentions were regarding this whole thing.
All right, guys. I see some of you are just joining in. So we're about to end the live, but you can find it on my YouTube. It is at true_crime_mama. If you go and search and you can't find it, the link is in my profile here on my TikTok. Now, it'll probably be up tomorrow over there. So that's where you can find it.
Thank you, True Crime Mama, for doing this last October, part 1 and 2.
Of course.
Thank you, Jim, for the countless hours that I aggravate you. I know it. Oh well. And the supporters, the outpouring support and love. I could not go day by day. So thank you.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Jim. I appreciate you coming on and sharing with us.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Good night.
Good night, y'all. Thank you.